Hello everyone and welcome back to another video. Today we're going to be moving on to more lore videos with the next set of my Lore of Hydaelyn series. If you want to watch the others, you can go down to the link below and have a look at all my other lore videos as we take a tour around the world of Final Fantasy XIV. Now, it's been a long time coming, but at last we have reached the very last of my Noscea videos, and it took a lot longer than I expected, but today is the last video we're going to be discussing Vylbrand, and we'll be moving on to a new location next week on Ardenald itself. So we have already talked about the city-state of Limsa as well as most of the other zones that are on Vylbrand. We've discussed Middle Noscea, Upper Noscea, Eastern and Western Noscea, as well as the Mists. So today we're going to be having a look at the last two zones of both Outer and Upper Noscea, as well as the Wolf's Den. So please sit back and enjoy. Now, since we've already talked in great detail about the other zones, we are going to go straight into the areas of both Upper and Outer Noscea, starting with Upper Noscea. Known primarily for the spectacular floating ruins of Nim, this can be viewed all along the territory's northwestern edge. This area stretches to the north of Noscea's inner regions and rises slightly in elevation towards the mountain of Ogomoro. Now, Upper Noscea is separated into two smaller pieces, and compared to the other zones, it is probably the smallest zone that we have here. And it's actually separated by a ferry that we have to take to and back in order to get to anywhere else. And so we're going to be starting off at Bronze Lake. Now, the formation of the great underwater fissures during the Calamity saw nearly half the water comprising Bronze Lake vanish into the span of a single night. The result was the uncovering of ancient Nemean ruins submerged for thousands of years, most notably the Wanderer's Palace, a temple dedicated to the god Oskon. And we actually have the Aetheryte crystal right in the middle here in Camp Bronze Lake. Now, in addition to the Wanderer's Palace, Bronze Lake's receding waters also revealed countless hot springs which were subsequently discovered to display remarkable therapeutic purposes to any and all who soaked in the heated pools. Now, Camp Bronze Lake was moved to this new location where the Yellowjackets lent their backs in the construction of the Warm Wine Sanatorium. It's a hospice of healing for soldiers injured in the line of duty. And this is where the main Aetheryte is for Upper Noscea. So this is actually kind of like a healing spa for wounded soldiers, where they can come here, rest, recuperate, and heal from their injuries, most likely due to either the Cobalt or the Sahagin. So unlike Costa del Sol, this area is not a resort. It's not like some fun place that you can go to in your spare time. It really is mostly for wounded soldiers. Of course, you are free to go to the hot springs and take a dip if you want to, but again, it's not really used for like a fun day out sort of place. Now, as for the Wanderer's Palace itself, though the Wanderer's Palace was a temple dedicated to Oskon, guardians of the deity of Nim, its history is a tragic one. Towards the end of the 5th Astral Era, a terrible and deforming sickness came upon the Maritime civilization. Since there was no cure for this sickness, the healthy Nimians feared the plague and came to abhor those who were stricken with this disease. And eventually they just locked the infected within the temple itself, sealing them with powerful magics, and drowned the palace in water from the Iron Lake as to forget about the ailing that ever existed. Which is harsh, if you ask me. I mean, they didn't ask to get sick. So what this disease is, we find out thanks to the Scholar questline, is actually where the Toneberries came from. Now, for the Toneberries, they were once people. They were Nimians, but once they grew sick with this terrible sickness, and we eventually found out where that sickness came from, it was actually planted there by the people of Mach. And eventually, people just got so scared of the Toneberries that they just locked them up in there and tried to drown them, tried to forget all about them. Ironically, though, the Toneberries survived the destruction of Nim because of the powerful magics that were sealed up around the palace. So even though the palace was submerged underwater all that time, the Toneberries trapped inside it survived. And so when the calamity struck and drained half the lake, this revealed the Wanderer's Palace, which in turn revealed the Toneberries, who started coming back out into the sunlight, but unfortunately they are still sick and they are still working on a cure to this day. So hopefully someday we will be able to find a way to cure all the Toneberries. Already in the Scholar questline, though, we made great strides and even ended up curing one of the Toneberries and returned her exactly how she was supposed to be. It's a really nice story. It's really good storytelling. Probably one of the better storytelling job quests, if you ask me. But other than those two locations, there's really not too many other areas around here that's really worth mentioning, except for Jijiriju's trading post. Now, the trading post is located on the eastern banks of Bronze Lake, one of two makeshift markets peddling baubles and trinkets to those brave enough to venture that deep into Cobalt lands. The other is Mimiru's trading post, run by Jijiru's estranged sibling, to whom the stubborn Kukurin merchant hasn't spoken to in about 20 years. That's very impressive. That's a very impressive time to refuse to speak to your own brother. But hey, what can you do? But it is important to speak with these guys because they ferry you back and forth between the two separate locations of Upper La Noscea. So you actually have the map here, and you can see that Upper La Noscea is separated into two small locations. Like I said, it's probably the smallest of the zones. And really, to get to the two parts, you kind of have to take the trading posts. Everything I just mentioned was part of Bronze Lake. The other half is known as Oakwood. And you can actually get to this location straight from Aleport. Now, Oakwood is a forest on the western shores of Bronze Lake, and saw a brisk trade in trees for which it was named until but a few years past. And there's actually a few landmarks here that you would like to pay notice of, such as Mimiru's trading post, which is the second half of the trading post. And Mimiru is a Kukurin shopkeep who peddles all manner of sundries from small trading posts. He even has dispatched a junkmonger to Poor Maid's Mill to share in the profits of rebuilding, which is really nice of him. As for Poor Maid's Hill itself, it was once a hamlet where men irked out a living through woodcutting. Poor Maid's Mill takes its name from the broken-hearted women whose lovers were lost to the kobolds or the forest. Though the villagers abandoned the place in the early 7th Astral Era, an estranged pirate crew known as the Salthounds have recently moved in, and under the strict guidance of their captain, they're begrudgingly attempting to restore the town to its former glory. And I guess that's noble of them. I mean, there are a lot of problems that we do face with the Salthounds, especially with during like the ninja questline, I think. But hey, if they end up bringing the town back to life, who am I to judge them? Next area we have is the Louse. Though there is no proof to support the claim, rumor has it that the sun-bleached remains of a long-dead denizen of the deep are those of one of the legendary twin sea serpents believed to have been unleashed by the navigator Lim Lane at the dawn of Era to fill the empty sea, the other being Pericos. And personally, I highly doubt that. I mean, it's impressive. It's an enormous sea serpent, and you can actually see here just how big it is from walking on its bones. So, I'm guessing that at one point this ancient beast either somehow washed ashore here, or this area was once underwater itself, and somehow it got beached here and just simply died. Because it is just an enormous skeleton that was just sort of left over. I'm guessing that it was also uncovered during the calamity, especially when the land changed so much. It revealed these giant bones, and people have started digging them out to really start examining them. You might want to be careful though, because this area is also infested with a lot of kobolds, and they don't like sharing. And the last area that we have here is known as Fool Falls, which you don't really see too often because it's kind of blocked from everywhere else. Now, when the woodcutters still piled their trade in the forest, they would send the felled timber down the river. Anyone caught bathing in the pool beneath this raging current was like to be crushed by the falling logs. Only a lackwit, it is said, would ever come to Fool's Falls. So that's how it's got its name. So I always wondered why it was called Fool's Falls, and now we know. Because when this place was still where people worked, where the woodcutters worked, they would actually just throw the logs right over the waterfall, and anyone who was dumb enough to be at the bottom would get crushed by the falling logs. That's really interesting. I found that kind of funny, to be honest. I mean, it's sad, it's kind of gruesome, but it's still funny. So those are really the two locations that we have in Upper La Noscea. The only other area that I can really think of is known as Zelmas Run, which is actually just beyond Bronze Lake. So after taking the ferry and you move upwards past Camp Bronze Lake, you come to two kind of twin paths to take, which is known as Zelmas Run. Now, long ago it is said that a hunter named Zelma one day chased his prey to the foot of Orgomoro, where he stumbled upon an armed force of kobolds moving southwards in disregard to the peace agreement with Limsa. Though he was gravely wounded in the encounter, Zelma managed to flee through the valley, and with his last breath he warned the people of the impending attack. However, that was enough. The Knights of the Barracuda mustered together and were able to put down the kobold insurgent. To this day, the path that Zelma ran bears his name, a reminder of the selfless hero who saved many lives with his sacrifice. Wow, that is something else. Like, there's a hero right there. So this actually also proves, I mean, if the story is right, this proves that tensions have always been really high between the Lomensans and the Kobolds even after the peace treaty. I mean, we do know that the reason that Titan was summoned in the game was because the Lomensans did end up breaking that peace agreement. But if this is right, then this also shows that the Kobolds were very close to breaking that peace treatment as well. I mean, there was really no point to it in the end because, well, no one seems to be able to keep their promises. What do you expect with a land of pirates? But hey, what can you do? So really not too much information as such as compared to the other locations. But we do have one more land, which is actually even smaller if you can believe that, which is known as Outer La Noscea. Now this is the northernmost region of La Noscea, and it expands borders on the mountains of Orgomoro itself, the highest points of Vylbrand, and is also the domain of the kobolds. So numerous are the beastmen that only the bravest dare venture here, and only the strongest of those return. So after passing through Zelmas Run, we come to what's known as the Long Climb. This is an area with the hills that rise dramatically upwards, and it is so named for the time required to ascend them. As the area's earth aspect was greatly weakened by the calamity, sections of ground now hover in the air, creating a truly fantastical sight. So these are actually more ruins of the city of Nymph. The city of Nymph was destroyed about 1500 years ago during the War of the Magi, and then there was the flood that came during that war. So most of these ruins were either trapped underwater or just still stuck in the ground. It is said that with the wind crystals in this area suddenly becoming corrupted and growing in power, as well as a weakening of the earth crystals, after the calamity, I guess earth aspected ether got so weak in this area that these crystals just started rising up, and so we have all these floating islands, which is really a beautiful sight. It's probably one of the most beautiful areas that I've seen here in Final Fantasy XIV. I do love learning everything that I can know about Nymph, and I do hope that they are able to at least study up more about this ancient city, and we actually have some Nymians who survive thanks to the Toneberries being trapped in the Wanderer's Palace. So, I don't know, I mean, I don't think that they're ever going to rebuild Nymph. I think that would be awesome if that ever happened, but I really don't think that's going to happen, at least not in this lifetime. So, apart from the floating city of Nymph, we also have the Hermits Hobble and Camp Overlook. Camp Overlook is where the next aetheryte crystal is, and it's also the only one you see in Outer La Noscea. It's said here that Camp Overlook is manned by the meanest, shite-kicking unit in the whole damn Maelstrom. Now, Camp Overlook serves as the base of operations for the Red Swallows, a privateer levy tasked with the surveillance of Cobalt activity in Outer La Noscea and alongside the slopes of Mount Orgomoro. So these guys are technically they're Maelstrom members, but they're also privateers. So they do take orders from the Maelstrom somewhat, but they really just do what they want. So they were told to watch over this area, keep an eye on the kobolds, but pretty much they can do whatever they want out there. So if the kobolds get a little too wild up, or they do start mobilizing and trying to move out, that's when the Red Swallows kind of move in and they just take care of any troublemakers. So, kind of a rough bunch, but once you get to know them, they're really not all that bad. And the only other location I can really think of in this part of Outer La Noscea is known as the Hermits Hobble. While few have ever seen the lord of this humble hideaway which rests precariously on the edge of the unscapable precipice, let alone obtain his permission for entering the premises, that hasn't stopped travelers who happen to come all this way from taking full advantage of the respite and the location offers, whether it be a dip in the streaming pools or a few bells slumber on the soft goose feather bed. And in case you don't know, the goose feather bed is like right on top of here. So you kind of have to do a little bit of a jumping puzzle to get up to that location. But yeah, I actually like this location a lot too because it's just a nice little like quiet home. Like you have like your own personal hot spring outside, you got a fantastic view, a nice house full of books, and pretty much everything you need for your home away from home. So no one knows exactly who lives here or what they're doing there, or maybe even seen them for a few decades. I don't know what happened to the guy, but hey, it doesn't stop people from using it whenever they do come this way. Okay, so that's everything kind of to the south and the western part of Outer La Noscea. Now we will move on to the final stretch of Outer La Noscea, which really belongs to the Cobalt. So this here is known as Iron Lake. Though it really doesn't look like it right now, it was once a great body of water that was about as large as Bronze Lake, maybe even bigger. Its waters have long since run empty through the fissures opening during the calamity along its floor, and the lake bed's unique color, which scholars believe stem from high sulfur content, is visible to any who make the treacherous climb to this forsaken corner of La Noscea. And it's also really pretty, but I can't imagine that it would smell very nice. So this is actually where the Cobalt Dig is. This is from where the 59th to the 639th Order of the Cobalts live. The Cobalts have sent a great many of their kind to dig and drill for precious ores at this busy site. And as for Ulgamoro itself, these are the Ulgamoro mines. So these are just the mining areas, not the city itself, but through this we are actually given a pretty good glimpse of what Cobalt Society looks like, as well as what their city is supposed to look like. The brilliant rainbow-colored hues that permeate the otherwise brisk slopes of Ulgamoro are a result of the endless flow of toxic slumgullion streaming forth from the labyrinthine warrens that make up Ulgamoro mines. As more kobolds arrive on the surface each day, there is a scramble to construct new forges to accommodate them. So you can actually see that this place is filled with like giant iron and metal structures and buildings, and these kobolds, like whatever else anyone may say about them, they're crafty. Like they are extremely skilled in metalworking, probably the most skilled in metalworking of all the beast tribes, and perhaps any kind of race like here on Hydaelyn. Very impressive work here. So we have forges, we have fires, we have hammerfalls going on all the time. And this is just the mining network here. We don't know like how big or how impressive like Ulgamoro itself is just yet. The only clue we really have is to the 789th Order dig. So for the Kobolds, you actually have different groups, and depending on what your number is, kind of stands on where you stand in Cobalt Society. So we do know that there are a grand total of 789 Order digs. And so the higher the number you are, kind of the lower you are on that totem pole, basically. The 789th is probably the smallest, I suppose you could say. Maybe not the smallest, but they're so looked down upon by their fellow kobolds that they're pretty much in exile. They're forced to kind of just stay like in this tiny cliff, and they're not really allowed to go home at this point. And to add insult to injury, since the site lies right in the middle of nowhere, it's not really a good vein of ore, so the kobolds here kind of have it rough. We do know, thanks to them, that they are the 789th, and there is no other. So they really are the low man on the totem pole. They are so looked down by everybody else, like even in Cobalt Society, that they're not even paid attention to. But still, they are friendly enough for people to be able to at least get to know them, get to talk to them, really get to learn a little bit more about Cobalt Society. And really, I don't mind the kobolds. I kind of find them a little bit annoying compared to some of the other beast tribes that we have, but this is also the area that you need to come to if you ever do want to do the Cobalt daily quests. So they're not terrible, not my favorite, but I enjoy them nonetheless. So that is everything that we know so far about Outer La Noscea. And we're going to be talking about one last place that we have here in mind, and that is known as the Wolf's Den Pier. Now, the Wolf's Den Pier is a small landing constructed by the Maelstrom against the wrecked ship, the Braveheart. It was built as a staging area for combatants to enter the floating Coliseum, also known as the Wolf's Den, which is a player versus player arena. So, this is where you need to come to for PvP, or player versus player. So inside the Wolf's Den is actually a chance for you to be able to compete against other players. This is not mandatory for people to do, but I do know a lot of people do enjoy it, or at least they do tolerate it to a certain degree. And with the Wolf's Den, there are actually several different stages that you can go to fight each other out. Like, we do have like the Hermits Highlands, we have Cartano, we have the Azim Steppe, but there is an Aetheryte crystal here that you can teleport straight over. And for most, the Calamity will be remembered for the destruction it wrought upon the realm. However, that is often overlooked in the fact that self-same destruction also gave rise to many different creations. One example being the odd crucible-shaped island which was thrust up from Gladian's Bay, and you can actually see it here in the background. Eorzea was not but 2 moons removed from the Calamity when a crew of sea wolves returned to Limsa Lominsa in the battered remains of the Braveheart discovered by this newly formed anomaly. Moving quickly as to not allow her enemies to foothold so much near the entire city itself, the Admiral laid claim to the island, and it was since transformed into a military training facility of sorts, known as the Wolf's Den, after the brave men and women who first happened across the place. Urged by its allies in Gridania and Udal, the Maelstrom soon opened the den's doors to all members of the Grand Companies of Eorzea, with the hopes that through the staged battles within, the strength of the realm's defenses would grow and learn together. So, like I said, this is really if you ever want to do player versus player, and personally, I'm not a big fan of player versus player. I do it every once in a while, but it's really kind of something that you need to do if you really just want to do it. However, I will say this, they do have some really nice prizes if you head over here. You can get really nice weapons, armor, and just any other kind of items, including mounts and minions and even hairstyles, which then you can trade with these guys for all sorts of prizes. So it's not mandatory, but it is fun to at least check out and see if there's anything you really want. Alright everyone, so I think that's it for now. I just want to thank you all so much for watching as we take our whole journey here across the land of Vylbrand. And this is just the first step. We will be moving on to all the other lands that we know so far for the land of Final Fantasy XIV, but this is in fact the very last video we will be doing for Vylbrand, unless we get some more information about it later on. And I might be doing a whole other video dedicated to simply about the city of Nymph and the Toneberries later on. That's something to look into. But yes, this is in fact the last of La Noscea. We will be moving on to a new location soon, and it's either going to be Gridania or Udal next. I'm decided to do like the 3 main city-states first, just so we get all that information out of the way, and since we do know the most about those areas, it did seem like a really nice idea to just kind of get all of that out of the way, basically. Once that's all done, we will be moving on to other locations such as Ishgard, the Forelands, the Hinterlands, the Churning Mist. We will be starting with those lands straight from Heavensward as well as Mordona. And then we'll be moving on to the lands that we got from Stormblood, which includes the Azim Steppe, Doma, Alamigo, Giorabania, all those wonderful places. So it's going to be kind of a long story, it's a nice haul, but hey, I'm ready for the challenge. Now there will not be a new video next week, mostly because I still haven't really decided which one of the 2 areas I'm doing, either Udal or Gridania. Either way, it's going to take a lot of research, so we will be taking a break for it for next week, but the week after that we will be continuing on with our Lore of Hydaelyn Series. So until next time everyone, thank you so much for watching. If you have a request of whether you would like to see Gridania or Udal first, just please drop a review down below, let me know. And smash the like button if you like this video. Otherwise, have a good rest of your day. Take care. Thank you all so much. And so long for now.